Good morning. Good morning. I have so many things. I have so many things to read. I think in the soup of cosmic dimensions and realms and realities, there's a church lady who comes forward who wants to, and the word of God, a reading from da da da. Thanks be to God. Because I can't start without a reading. It's just, that's the way it is. And I thought of, I didn't think of them. They just came forward, so many different ones, but I think I'm going to settle out on whichever one is easiest. The first year that we were here, our friend Felicia was here, and she has a voice like a late night radio disc jockey. I mean, and her laughter is like this smooth, like drink of silk. And I remember reading this, and anytime I read it now, I still hear Felicia and that ooh, that, like, you know what I'm saying? Any of you have heard her laugh. I'm really kind of a Sufi at heart. And a lot of the Sufi stuff, can start to sound a little bit hedonistic, if we run it through our Western mind, that there's not any of the discipline of Zen there, but there is. There is. But it is given in a way of abandonment. Abandonment. And there's just something very resonant with it here. Aja used to say, go to the darkest place in the forest where there is no path and enter there. And if I read something like from Kabir or Rumi or any of that, that's what I hear. It's in this way of dancing and singing and joyfulness, but it's also quite the pointer of abandonment of the conceptualization and the slicing and dicing. So this is Kabir, 15th century Indian mystic and poet, who was kind of considered to be the father of bhakti, but I'm wondering if the women who were having babies at that time really felt that he was the patron saint of bhakti, but you never know. He was a great guy. And kind of a patron saint of Hinduism and Sufism, Sikhism. Let's see if he can remind us. I know the voice of depression and war still calls to you. I know these habits that shield us and ruin our lives still send their invitations, but you are with a friend now, and you look so much stronger, and you can stay that way and even bloom. Learn to recognize the counterfeit coins that may buy you just a moment of pleasure, but then drag you for days like a broken man behind a farting camel. Oh, keep squeezing drops of the sun from your prayers, work, and music, and your companion's beautiful laughter, and from the most insignificant movements of your own holy body. Now, sweet one, be wise. Cast all your votes for dancing. God wants to see love and playfulness, for that is the divine image of Him expressing as you. I should not make any promises right now, but I know if you pray somewhere in this world, something good will happen. Light will someday split you open, even if your life right now feels like a cage. Love will surely burst you wide open into an unfettered, new, blooming galaxy. Let's drink compassion and get drunk on delicious love. Ever since happiness learned your name, it's been running through the streets trying to find you. All the false notions of myself that once caused fear and pain have turned to ash as I neared God, and love was the funeral pyre where the heart laid its body. Sing, because that is the food our starving world needs. Laugh, because that is the purest sound. I have come into this world to see this, the sword drop from men's hands, even at the height of their arc of anger, because we have finally realized there is just one flesh to wound, and it is the beloved's. I know sometimes our lives still feel like a cage, right? The sense of separate self persists and veils the uncaused love at the heart of being. Some, like Sokni Rinpoche calls it essence love. Some call it original love. Here it came into view as uncaused love because I couldn't find any reason other than love itself for the love. Love was just love, was just love, was just love. There was no other reason. No other. Everything okay? Okay. Timo's looking at me like maybe there's a problem. No other cause. Causeless. Fresh. Ever. And, before that dawned in consciousness, I would have heard it with a very cynical mind. Very, very cynical before that actually came into being here. I love listening to a teacher. His name is Neil Douglas Klotz. He's a Sufi teacher, and he also is a scholar who translates the sacred literature of Western Asia. I'm getting that right. Middle East is actually Western Asia, right? No? Asia. Okay. East. Okay. Thank you. Also known as Middle East, but that's a colonial term. East Asia. The sacred literature that comes out of there. He translates from the Aramaic, the Semitic languages, into English. Rather, it skips the Greek, it skips the English, straight from the Aramaic. And he was giving a lecture, I don't know, his talks are kind of like Dr. Hawkins. They're similar to a lecture. They're not PowerPoint, but anyway, he was giving a talk, and he was talking about after the man we call Jesus had his conversion, River Jordan, he went into the wilderness, the darkest place without a path. He went into the wilderness, and the temptation that is translated, the Aramaic word Satan, that has been translated into Satan with like a capital S, is actually the stinging, cynical mind. That's what he was tempted with in the wilderness. That's what came to say, no, 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 not you, not you, me. That was revolutionary for me to hear. Especially as a, Westerner, an educated, I'm not against any of our brilliant intellects. There would be no point in being against any of that. But the temptation is to dismiss the actuality that is being pointed to by Kabir and that we all feel. In group yesterday, I asked someone who is, struggling with, I'm getting glimmers, but I can't really hold on to it, sort of feeling we've all had. And we just ask, well, where is it now? In the cave of my heart. Instantly. Instantly. Instantly we know. And the temptation, the distraction, the seduction is, as Byron Katie calls it, false evidence appearing real. Fear. False evidence appearing real. But it's so juicy because it's sensual. We have senses. We see, we smell, we taste, we feel. Which is not a problem until we start believing, till the believer intercepts the information. So the senses bring the information in, and there's a direct experience, but it's so overlayered and so 1/10,000th of a second, as Kathleen and I's teacher used to say, Dr. Hawkins, before the believer, the perceiver, the someone, the experiencer, steps in there and grabs it, talks about it, categorizes it, analyzes it, puts it in its right place. And that's when the direct experience, the sensory experience, starts becoming something. And the next moment is prejudiced by memory. It cannot be fresh if it is being perceived through memory rather than direct experience. And then there is this narration that tells us it's very real, and that narration and that self-consciousness has become a separate self, a separate entity, a separate being, the someone who is compassionate, the someone who is peaceful, the someone who this, that, the other thing, is a woman, is a man, is a Christian, is a Democrat, whatever it is. Which is not so bad either, if it isn't believed to be essentially true. I loved Byron Katie's description of awakened consciousness as I'm no longer a believer. That really resonated here. Really resonated. And I've also heard her say, somebody asked her if she believed anything, and she said, well, it just hasn't come into, my experience in a really, really long time. But if I needed a belief, I wouldn't hesitate to get one. That's freedom. That is freedom. That is like standing beyond any kind of notion of what anything is. So I know here that there have been a lot of phases. Audrey called them phases, so I'm going to go with that word. That you just can't find an actual word for it. And at each phase, there has been the temptation. There has been the temptation to have something come in and own it, have it, believe it, claim it. I have a brilliant teacher sitting in the room with us, so I have a mantra that is written on this consciousness. Sweetheart, I wouldn't make too much of it. I'm telling you. Sweetheart, I wouldn't make too much of it. There's a lot of places that you think you've landed. Someone. Even when the actual faculty, I'm going to call it, whereby there's a self-reflectiveness that talks to itself, drops out. For the most part, it drops out. Hasn't happened here in a long time. There's still habituation, conditioning, and collective belief. Woo, is there ever collective belief? Sharon was talking about Joel Goldsmith, and he, much to his great surprise, in the New York City Jewish door-to-door salesman, started receiving the teachings of who he called the Master, Christ. And it grew into this togetherness. He never wanted it called organization or anything like that, but a togetherness that was, thousands and tens of thousands of people worldwide, the infinite way. And the presence, the radiant transparency, the rooted reality in that expression, Joel Goldsmith, was so prominent that that field would just rectify, restore, and redeem whatever came into it. So, of course, people wanted to eat him alive because cancers disappeared and, the rain came when it needed to, the whole thing. Can't remember where I was going with that, but he pointed to the complete relinquishing, releasing, letting go, giving way of believing that there are two powers, good and bad. Because the reflective world, sure, the seductive, false evidence appearing real, sure looks like there's good and bad. But if in the ground, and in this Sangha, we can talk about this now. In the ground, there is an unopposed, basic, the Tibetans call it basic goodness. It's unopposed. It isn't in opposition or relationship to a polarity, a dualism. This is, the conceptual mind, the tempter, will never understand this. Absolutely never understand this. It will go through all kinds of demonstrations to say, no way. There is a good that overcomes bad. But what we are beginning to realize is that if that was true, then there would always be the eye for an eye. This bad needs more good. Okay, now this good, now this, you know what I'm saying? Understand? There will never be an end. And then all the belief, including spiritual beliefs, about the earth as a hell realm come into being. Well, this is a school in a hell realm, and there's like all the bad stuff. We come here to just work it out. Lord have mercy. And to say no to that takes a tremendous amount of unflinching. That's where I was going with it. People considered Joel Goldsmith to be a very cold person. They wanted his personal empathy, his personal sympathy. They wanted to do that thing that we all do, where we give each other our personal, what Jigme calls idiot compassion, which Timo thinks doesn't sound very nice. But nevertheless, that's what Kenpo Jigme calls it, idiot compassion. My version of what you need. And what Joel is saying is, of my own self I can do nothing. Lord, give me eyes to see. And it's a very different prayer. A very different prayer. If you don't like the word Lord, I mean, he was old school. These words, like Sharon was saying, find one that resonates. For that which can't be named. That from which I come. The animating, sustaining, maintaining, unspeakable truth. So this path, what do we want to call the journey of spiritual unfolding? What's happening? The return, the remembering of one's home is no joke. It's right down to the nitty-gritty, deepest roots of separation that are very unconscious. Very, very unconscious. And the sense of survival written into the separate self is really something. We've all experienced it. It will fight tooth and nail, not out of, there's a demonic quality to the me or something like that. No, 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 no. There's a heroic quality to the me. It thinks it's a hero. It's saving the ship. Don't go there. Don't go to the wilderness. Don't do that. Stay right here. Where you know what's good and what's bad. What exists and what doesn't exist. What's real and what's unreal. That force, it's not a power. There's one power. The unnameable, unspeakable, unfathomable creator of all that is. Call that what you will. But the force of the survival, the sense of, keeping one's self around is strong. And it's hardwired in to the base of the brain. But as I'm sure Debbie and probably some of you can speak to, there is wiring within that has never been lit up and is beginning to. That is 100% coming into being to be much more prominent. It was obvious here. I've always been kind of a person, so don't worry if it's not obvious. It's not like a failure or anything. I've always been the kind of person who there's actually a name for these people. It's a brain type that I have kind of an inner sense of the cells of my liver and that kind of thing. So here it was obvious things were turning on in the brain, turning on that had not been turned on. And this people can find this through journeys with plants and medicines and all that stuff. Here it just happened out of the blue in Warrior One. But I want to back up just a little bit because I don't know if there is a map for this waking up. There seem to be many. They all seem to say the same thing in the end, if you're really listening to truth and not kind of getting into a cul-de-sac of belief and somebody's brand new idea about awakening. Never been said before. Anyway. Here's an offering. If it doesn't resonate, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. But here is an offering. Something that, came of a contemplation that was resonant here of, so what does it take? Sharon and I have talked about it quite often. Ani and Sharon and I. What does it take to, when it comes down to those deepest roots, deepest unconscious roots of personhood, selfhood, identified believingness and separation, what does it take to let that go? Remember Begin with remembering. Feel it in the body. Not intellectually, not analytically. In the body, ask, where is my deepest sense of knowing who I am? Where is it? Where is it? Then attend. Bring the attention there. Attend. Remember, find it viscerally, somatically, and then begin to reorient. Remember, reorient. Begin to reorient to this. It can be discouraging because we're very habituated to orient to the narration and the spectacle and the otherness. It's okay. It is absolutely not a failure. That's why I like the word practice and training. And it can sound a little too like, oh. But we have to reorient to that. Even if it's, okay, 5 seconds at the stoplight. First thing in the morning is a powerful one. Ramana's time. Ramana's time, I think of it as, because that was Ramana's pointer. When you first wake up in the morning, there's your moment, man, before you assume anything. Right then, in that moment, deepest remembering, where do I sense it in the body? It doesn't matter if it matches somebody else's or it's a different phase than somebody else's. It's self, it's no self, it's this, it's that. It's yours, your deepest sense. And begin to reorient to that. This will engender and ignite and activate a rewiring. It does it. You don't have to. If I plant a corn seed, I don't have to sit there and worry that I'm going to get an oak tree. It's a corn seed. It's okay. Reality's got it. So the reorientation engenders, activates, ignites a rewiring. And to endure, that's a terrible word. And here it was like that, but it doesn't have to be for you. To be able to have the capacity to meet that rewiring. Keep remembering, keep reorienting. This leads to an ability, a capacity to receive, to let go. If somebody 30 years ago would have been, told me, you're going to sit in front of a group of people and say, let go and let God, I would have been like, I don't think so. Trust me. I had the wheel, and I worked hard to get where I was and overcame trauma and all the rest. Receive, 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 receive. What does Anandamayi Ma say? Oh, grace is ever present and abundant. Keep your vessel upright so that it may be full. For the tempter, the analytical, what's the word translated Aramaic? Stinging, cynical intellect, mind, that's just not comfortable. It's not comfortable to let go. And in that case, we remember and come back to that sense. And at this point, we will have cultivated or uh, animated, let's say, because it's there in its original glory and divinity, and it's not really anything we can achieve or manufacture or cultivate. But it can feel that way. It can feel like it's growing because the capacity to see it is growing. So we just keep remembering, we keep that fire stoked. I've found that if we can sense it in the body, even if it's, something strange to the analytical mind, like, why would I feel it in my left foot? Like it immediately jets off into why I just would really encourage just laying all of that why, reasonability, need to know aside. And that's yet another filter and mediation on the direct experience. Where are we going to trace back to for our cause and effect? The Big Bang? When did the ball get rolling for all the whys? The intellect isn't going. It's inconceivable. The great mystery. That's why. The great mystery. It's kind of dumbfounding in a good way. It stands you still, which is exactly where we need to be. Just stood still. The stillness of the separate idea. The stillness of that which is beyond war. The war of good and bad. And the belief that there's a power, that the power of love is something that overcomes something else. It's not in relationship to anything. It is. It is. Infinite, eternal, is. It is intimate, beyond intimate, closer than close, like wetness and water. That kind of intimacy. Totally impersonal. Water's not trying to be wet, not thinking about being wet, not bestowing it here, overcoming things with it here, having it here, owning it here, holding it back here. It's wet. Love is love, is love, is love. It just is. we can make of it what we will, and we do. It doesn't have a judgment where it's going to say, well, you can't do that. It just gives each and every holy instant purely, here it is. Here it is. We can't stop it if we want to. Here it is. Here it is. Here it is. Here it is. It's overwhelming when it becomes experienced, because it knocks you down in a good way. I'm not saying, but everything that can't stand up to that ferocity comes into view. You know, it can be really subtle what we decide to believe about our experience. It's super, super, super subtle. Like, if I'm sorry, but it's just super distracting to have phones in the meditation hall. But um, it can be really subtle what we end up believing about what we've experienced, as if there can be, like, the pull of duality, let's say, is very, very strong. It's very strong. So if there is a sense, a real felt, lived sense of peace without opposite, joy without opposite, love without opposite, the mind, the analytical mind, the subtle identification process will start looking for that which is in opposition. It's just, even though the direct experience is one of, well, they use the word absolute, unopposed. And again, this is that, I mean, if temptation's too strong of a word, I don't know what it might work for you. But I think most paths talk about the seductiveness of the sensory world, the information coming from the senses, and how it slices and dices it into categories of this and that, this and that, this and that. So I guess also I want to say and offer a trusting in the direct experience of what feels true. Not true, not relatively, like in opposition to your neighbor, or in opposition to another this, that, or the other thing, or in opposition, but you know what I'm talking about. When it would cost you integrity to go against it, your sense of it, that kind of truth. When you just know that if I go against this, if I speak something different than this, or act differently than this, I'll lose some integrity, which is not a failure. It's not a failure. We're coming out of coming out of the spell of the conditioned mind. There are going to be, a lot of ins and outs and what have yous. That's why, personally, here, I've never, for some reason, I mean, thanks be to Source. For some reason, I haven't had the temptation to abandon Sangha or abandon the path or abandon a teacher or abandon because I platformed somewhere, got somewhere, and I no longer needed, the refuge of Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. That hasn't been a thing, but I know it can be tempting for some people, like, well, here I am. I remember a story about Nisargadatta. Somebody asked him, well, why do you tend all these funny little altars in your room and, keep the fires of bhakti going and, continue with your devotion when, this is what you're saying, I am that I am, and, I am that, and giving us that kind of dharma, a real absolute sort of teaching. And he said, well, my life, when I look in, and he obviously wasn't experiencing an opposition of in and out. It's just a way of speaking. When I look in, everything is wisdom, and when I look out, everything is love. And my life turns between these two. You could say up and down just as easily, or in and out, or whatever you want to say. Vertical, horizontal. And it was also, he also said in that same answer to that question, he wanted to honor those who had come before him, and especially his guru. He was in a guru situation because that was his culture, and he followed. His guru said, you are that, and that he decided to believe that over everything else. And he wanted to honor that with his altars. Devotion felt rich and supportive because the world is still the world. We're still in the world, not of it. And that becomes very, very clear. We're not of the false evidence appearing real. But we're amongst it. Jerkdom happens here, there, and everywhere. But that's coming from a person who is very bhakti wired. I'm very wired for bhakti, very wired for devotion. And that may not be your thing, but I don't know that it was necessarily Nisargadatta's either. And he saw that it served. It served. And so, like Byron Katie, if she needed a belief and it would serve, she'd get one. Because what is happening now is a free-falling immediacy. This is a free-falling immediacy that is responsive somehow. So it's not determined to avoid, deny, repress, suppress, grab, push, all that stuff that the self-centered self is all about, not as a failure, like we talked about, but as a mistaken, conditioned belief structure. So we can stay behind the farting camel. It's okay. It really is okay. You really get that. You really get that. Meanwhile, we are a blooming galaxy. There is just no denying it. I would lose integrity if I denied it. Just no denying it. I'm going to leave that for another time. Let's see what this says. Another of my all-time faves is Meister Eckhart. What a dear heart. And I mean, he was running scared. Well, he wasn't scared, but he was running for his life. You know, the church was like, wait a minute, you're telling way, way too much truth. They were coming, but he, by the grace of God, passed on before they got to him so they could torture him. I love him. He's so present, and he's just, it resonates so deeply. The rest you desire. At the heart of who you are is the ground. That is no ground. The place that is no place. The endless source and boundless center where God dwells. Not in some manner or another, but without any manner. In the naked and divine nature, which is the ground of God's oneness and yours. If you wish to rest in the oneness, and more than this, if you wish to become one in your life and discover the oneness of your life, go to the ground and dwell there. When you do, you'll find you are one with the one who is one with you in the ground. Just as everything flows from the oneness, so too does the rest you desire in the innermost depths of your life. That's the unflinching, I will not be moved. We have to dwell there, inhabit the ground, inhabit the right here, right now, dwell there. Put our roots down, anchor. But like Kabir says, you're with a friend, we're with friends now, and we can rest and even bloom. Why not? Why not? So we're going to take a break and then come back for guided meditation. And I would just say that it's really, really, truly, genuinely all right if you have a sense of, I need to go to the river. I don't want to listen to this woman. Whatever it is, you don't have to come back. I'm genuinely, you can follow a sense of what you need to do. But we'll do a guided meditation if you want to join in. Thank you.